I'll get emotional when I talk about my love of the love of his children. He loved his children enormously, and I've had some difficult times in my life, and my dad was there and showed unconditional love for me every time. He was absolutely 100% supportive, and just a spectacular father. He really was an incredible support to all of his children, and loved them and cared for them enormously. He was very generous with people. There were a number of people that he helped. There were just things he did, little things that he did. When we were kids, we'd go watch the Thanksgiving parade at a Pearl Peterson's apartment in Detroit, and my brother would say afterwards, "Well, why are we watching it here? We don't get a good view here. There are much better places." Well, after we were adults, we realized we weren't going there to watch the parade. We were going there to be nice to Pearl Peterson, and it was just the way my father conducted himself, the things that he did. I remember when he ran for governor the first time, Gus Scholl, somehow it got in the press that he was praying about whether to run for governor. And Gus Scholl said, "Oh, what does he think? He has a private pipeline to God." And my dad said, "I have the same pipeline everybody else has." So he knew how to, he was the one that coined the phrase gas guzzling dinosaurs,
right,
about the big threes cars. And
right.
He just was an innovative, creative kind of guy.
Didn't he in 1994, when Mitt was running against Teddy Kennedy for the U.S. Senate, your father went out to Massachusetts and campaigned tirelessly
He
for
did.
him, and he was in his 80s by that time.
My mother wasn't particularly well at the time, so he added some space in the house so that a couple could live there and be with her when he was gone, and he was there, and he'd fly to Boston and take the tube out to wherever Mitt was and do whatever he could to campaign. And toward the end of the campaign, when it looked like Mitt was not going to win for Senate against Ted Kennedy, my dad said, "Well, he called me on the phone, and he said, you gotta tell your brother that we could still win this thing." He said, we should. I'm having all the family come, all the grandchildren, all the children. I'm having them all come, and we can spread out across the state, and we can win this thing. And Mitt says we should just all stay together and have a good time. And I said to him, he was in his 80s, late 80s.
Yeah,
and I said, "Well, Dad, Mitt ought to be able to say he ran the campaign the way he wants to run." And he paused for a second, and he said, "Oh, you're right." And it was amazing to see how he could change his mind. He liked to listen to other people's viewpoints, and was always open-minded in thinking about things that went forward.
Yeah.
He would always have a discussion with his children before he ran for office and before my mother ran for office. I remember he'd always say, "What do you think about this?" and lay it out, the pros and cons. And my sister would say, "That's great." My other sister would say, "That's great." And I'd say, "That's great." And Mitt say, "Have you thought about this?" "Have you thought about that?" He'd always come up with the things that were the negatives. It was really kind of fascinating. But anyway, yes, he was an amazing guy. He loved to exercise. He walked ever in the morning, and when he played golf, he'd go over early in the morning and play golf with 3 balls and run around the course with a putter and a 2-iron, and that was all he'd take, and basically run around the course. And they called him the Ghost because his footsteps would be there, but nobody ever saw him.
Wow. Yeah, I remember those stories. What about his relationship with Nelson Rockefeller?
Well, that was interesting because when he decided to run for president, it was after Governor Scranton and Governor Rockefeller came to him and said that they were going to give him their unconditional support and that they would never do anything else but support him. And so after my dad had made the mistake of saying brainwashing, and things didn't look so good for a while, Rockefeller instantly kind of changed his tune in public, and so it really hurt to the effort of my father, and that's one of the things that caused him to drop out.
Do you remember anything about the executive mansion, the governor's mansion on Mackinac Island?
I sure do. We went up there. We went up there a fair amount, and we stayed there. It was very nice. It was a lovely place. I remember Mitt would take his boat up there, and he had a little teeny 16-foot power boat, and I know he was out there with his girlfriend Ann, and whom he ended up married. And one night they were out under the bridge, and they looked like the shore was moving, and it turned out it was a freighter going by that narrowly missed them.
I know a lot of legislators appreciated George Romney inviting them up there and playing golf with him, including some Democrats who were never invited by Soapy Williams or anybody else who had been a Democratic governor up there to play golf with him.
Well, my dad loved to play golf, but and he had fairly decent scores. But Billy Casper, who the pro once
Yeah.
who played with him, said that my dad was the ninth wonder of the world. He said his stroke was so bizarre. Have you seen Charles Barkley's stroke these days? It was get up on his tippy toes and dance around a little bit before the
Right.
club would come down and
Right.
hit the ball square.
Right. So Mormonism was such an enormous influence on your whole family and your father's life. I mean, your family was really in on Mormonism from the very beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Back
Well,
in the
my
1830s?
great grandfather. Let's see, Helaman Parley, grandfather, who was one of the early members of the
Yeah.
church in 1930. Within 6 months after the church was formed, he was
Yeah.
one of the early leaders. He ended up being assassinated in Arkansas in the 1850s. But yes, many of my mother's family as well. But my mother's father was an early member of the church. He joined on his own as a teenager in England and came to the United States. But other than that, it went back generations. I think another interesting thing about my dad is that when he was a young man, his mother died of asthma when he was in high school. She had a major asthma attack, and in those days, asthma was difficult, and they didn't
Yeah.
know what to do. And so one time, a doctor said to her, "Well, if we pull all your teeth, your asthma will go away." So they pulled all her teeth, and of course, it didn't do anything for her.
Oh, my God.
But she died. She died when he was about 16 or 17, and so when he left to go east,
Yeah.
and to go on his mission, he took his dad to his mother's grave, and he said, "I will never do anything to bring shame on the family name. I will always provide honor to the name of this family."
That's amazing. Is there something about Mormonism as a faith that has a particular appeal to your family that you can think of? What is it about Mormonism that means something really significant
Well, of
to
course,
you?
the major aspect, the name of our church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so the main thing of our church is to believe in Jesus Christ, as other Christians do, and so that is, believing in our Father in heaven and Jesus Christ is a huge thing. There are other things. There's several doctrinal things that are a little different and so forth. And the other aspect of it is the emphasis on family. And we believe that people that are married in this life will be married in the next life if they are married in the proper way, and that families will live together forever, and that there's a family unity that survives death. And so that's a major aspect of our faith, and causes you to look on your family in a much more significant way.
At the end of his life, and I know it came abruptly, and George Romney didn't expect to pass away when he did. It was right after he'd been exercising, I believe, on his exercise
He
bike.
died on his treadmill. He'd called me the night before and said, "Scott, we got to do this, and Scott, we got to do that," and
I know.
and told me things that he thought we needed to do. He was just always
He was
always
tireless.
involved in
Yeah.
wanting to do something to make the world better, and those things were largely to make the family better. But he kept telling us that we needed to get involved in the community, to help the community and make a difference in our communities.
Do you think he looked back at his life at that point? I know he wasn't satisfied, because he was never satisfied. There was always something else to do. But do you think he looked back at his life with a great deal of satisfaction in what he'd accomplished, particularly in politics and government?
I think he did look back on it with great satisfaction. I think he felt that he'd made a significant difference, and that he felt that there were other things that needed to be done. He wasn't happy about everything going on in government at the time, but he felt that he'd made a significant difference in his life for the betterment of the government, for his family, for his church, for himself individually. I think he felt that he had lived a very good life.
When you talk about family, his granddaughter, your daughter, Ronna Romney McDaniel, is now the national Republican chairman. What would your father think of that?
Well, he'd
if
be
he knew that?
surprised, and he'd be thrilled, and he'd be thrilled. And you know, he didn't see Mitt win as governor, and didn't see Mitt become presidential candidate and win the nomination. So he would have been very proud of that as well. He would have been proud of for all of us. But he would have loved seeing that my daughter's involved in politics, and would be talking to her about it all the time. We did that at the dinner tables. We talked about politics at the dinner tables, and I remember there was one time that a man named Eustace Seligman came to our home. He was on the board of Hudson Motor Company and was a lawyer in New York with a major firm, and it was such an intelligent conversation. It was just me, my dad, and Mr. Seligman, and it had such a powerful influence on me that I ended up going to law school and joined his law firm at first.
Wow. Let me ask you, the issues today that are predominant, particularly social, cultural issues, that were not at all prevalent at the time your father was governor. Things like abortion and LGBT rights and gun rights and flag desecration, all these social, cultural issues. How do you think your father would have handled a lot of those issues today if he was involved
Well,
today?
my father was a pro-life person, so he would believe in that. On the other hand, he would honor what people had decided in terms of the country, but he was pro-life. On LBGT issues, I think his view, he'd have his own religious view about how he believed that people should live their lives, but he would believe that we need to be kind and loving to everyone and let other people determine how they're going to live their lives in whatever they wish to live their lives.
You think he would have been able to survive politically in this kind of a climate today that we have, with this tremendous polarization over a lot of these issues?
I have no idea whether he would. I do know this, that he was such a dynamic person and so forceful in terms of his personality and in his speaking style that I think that would be appealing to a lot of people today. But he was very forthright. He was not did not say wild things about the people and so forth. So I think that I don't know where that would be. But the polarization would be a real concern for him today. I think that would be a major problem, that he would want to see people being able to be more civil and to find a way to work together and find common causes in terms of so many things that are important in terms of foreign policy, domestic policy in this country. He'd be worried about the economy as a major effect, and he believes that our country is a truly benefited country, and that we have not only helped the people in this country, but we've lifted people in poverty around the world more than any other country has ever done in the history of mankind.
Well, Scott Romney, unless you have something else that you'd like to add, I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us about your father. A unique individual, a unique governor, a unique man, unbelievable story, life story. Thank you very much.
I thank you for doing this, and I thank you for the opportunity to try to honor my father. I will tell you again that he's the greatest man I've ever known. He's an incredible hero to me.
Well, I'll say one more thing. Looking at you and watching you speak and your smile right now, I see George Romney. George Wilkin Romney.
That's very nice to you. Very nice of you.
There is tremendous connection between you and your father.
Thank you very much. Thank you.